Hi everyone, I'm Holly Hanley. Welcome to my painting studio. Today I'm going to be painting Country Harvest, and if you'd like to follow along, you can find the e-packet on my website, which is www.hollyhanley.ca. This is actually an instant download, so you print it out and it contains all the colors that I'm going to be using, detailed instructions, as well as a line drawing to trace onto your canvas. And today I'm using a 10 by 20 canvas. And we're going to be using all kinds of beautiful warm colors like you see here in Saskatchewan with the elevators and all the trees turning color. I'm using the DecoArt Traditions. It's actually it's a beautiful artist acrylic. It goes on really nice, it's easy to work with, and it rinses out with water. Let's get started. All right, so we're gonna start with the sky first. This is actually, I'm just using a 3/4 inch flat, but if you have a 12 shader, that'll work just fine. And you'll notice that I base coated the canvas with black. I absolutely love the contrast. I like leaving a little bit of the black showing in between the different sections. It just adds a little bit of depth and some shadow. Okay, so I'm going to be starting with a really nice light yellow. Okay, I'm going to mix it with a little bit of white, and I'm going to add another yellow and then some orange, and I'm going to work up to the blue. Okay, so it's really important to remember not to mix the blue and the yellow together, otherwise you're going to get that green sky. Okay, so we're just going to be careful about that. I'm going to go around the trees a little bit, okay, and you can come over them a little because you can always base coat them with black after, but I'm just going to start right on that nice bright spot, right on the vanishing point or the horizon line here. Okay, so wet your brush first, tap off the excess water. Okay, so I've got that brightest yellow, and I'm mixing a little bit of white in with it. And I'm just going to start with, I've got a 12 shader here actually that I switched to just because it's a little bit smaller. And I'm going to just start right on that sort of the vanishing point, the horizon line. It's kind of the farthest distance that we see in the picture. Okay, and I'm going to bring this upwards, coming over top. Okay, and I might even do this twice just so that the color is really nice and vibrant. Okay, and I'm going to mix in a little bit of that darker yellow with a little bit more white. Okay, bringing that up. Okay, don't be afraid if you go over your trees a little bit. We can always go back and add a little bit of black over top. Okay, so just brushing back and forth, nice long strokes, like so. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit of that orange. Looks so pretty and just really warms up the sky. Okay, so right in here. So I haven't rinsed my brush, I'm just sort of picking that up and adding a little bit. Okay, and don't worry if it's not perfect. Usually with the sky, I give it a couple coats just so that the colors cover really nicely over the black. Okay, so this is kind of like our little practice layer. Don't have to worry too much about it. Okay, so the orange I put in, which is really quite a nice warm color, and it also works as kind of like a buffer in between that blue and the yellow. Okay, so I'm just adding a little bit of the white. Okay. Like so. And then I'm going to grab blue, rinse out your brush. Okay, and you can grab a little bit of white and some blue. Okay, and we'll just kind of work it into that orange, like so. Okay, so this is just to get those colors in. I'm going to give it a second coat, blending it again. And it'll be much easier the second time. Okay, and every time that I do these skies, they always turn out differently. Everyone is unique, which is nice. and I'm just going to use a little bit more of the blue, not as quite as much white in the corner there. Okay, so I've got blue, and I'm going to mix a little bit of that orange in here just to make the sky a little darker in that corner. All right, so I'm gonna let that dry, and I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna do it one more time, and then we'll add some nice little clouds in there. Okay, so this is dry, and I'm actually gonna give it a second coat. And I'm just gonna put a little bit of water down first, just so that my colors stay wet a little bit longer and I have more time to blend. And you can actually do this the first time that you do this as well. Sometimes it's a nice little trick, so it just keeps your paints wet so that you have a little bit more time to blend. Okay, so I'm going to use the same colors. It'll just be a little bit more vibrant over the black. Okay, so the yellow and a little bit of white just to start, and I'm using my 12 shader. Okay, so just right at that horizon line, the vanishing point would be about here. Okay, it's the farthest distance in the painting that you can see. Okay, and I love how the warm colors of this picture just draw you into this. Okay, so you can use the yellows, and I'm adding a little bit of white just to kind of soften. Okay. Nice and bright. Okay, and then I'm going to add a little bit of orange. Okay, so you can always fix up your little elevators after if you do go over them. Okay, so just brushing that color on, you can see it's a lot more vibrant just with that second layer. Okay, and I'm just kind of threading it into the blue. Okay, doing some little streaks, just pulling that color in. Love it. So pretty. Okay, and then we're going to add some nice clouds in there as well. Okay, so I just added a little bit of water to my brush, just kind of pulling that nice little sunset color into the blue that I have. With the blue, I'm not going to worry too much about, I don't really think it needs a second coat, but this part really did. Okay, and then if you want to use a filbert brush, or you have one, a filbert brush just has a rounded tip on it. Okay, so you're going to wet it first, tap off the excess water. And I'm going to use a little bit of blue and a touch of orange to make those clouds. Okay, so the blue is just a little bit more muted then. Okay, and I just sort of scribble them in. So I hold my brush, I'm resting my hand on my pinky, and I'm just going to kind of scumble and scribble them in. You know, clouds are always a little different. Okay, so I've got a couple more. Again, I'm just kind of scumbling them in. On my clouds, I usually make them a little bit more flat on the bottom. Just kind of trail them in there. Get a little bit smaller, of course, as they near the horizon line. Okay, nice big one right here maybe. Okay, so that's just with some blue and a little bit of orange. Like so. Okay, and I'm just scumbling a few more in there. wherever you want, wherever your heart desires. You can add a few little clouds, and again, I'm just using my filbert brush. The filbert has a rounded tip on it. Okay, and just kind of doing a little bit of a circular motion, very scribbly. They're all a little different. They don't have to be perfect, of course. Just getting that color in there, and then of course I have a few just sort of trailing down at the bottom there by the horizon. Okay. Of course, things that are bigger are closer to you, and as the size changes, they get farther away, so they're smaller. Okay, so I've got a few here, and then I'm going to take a little tiny bit of orange and maybe some white, orange, maybe a little yellow. Okay, and I'm going to add a nice little glow on the bottom of some of those little clouds. So as you can see, it's just kind of maybe the sunset is hitting the bottom of some of those clouds. Okay, so I just kind of mixed up a little bit of orange and yellow and white together. Looks kind of pretty. Every time I do this, it's a little different, which is nice. Every painting is unique, as well as every sky. Okay, so this time I had a little bit more yellow. Okay, but just kind of scumbling or scribbling along the bottom of those clouds. Looks pretty. Okay, maybe a little bit more orange on some of these ones. I've got lots of orange in there. So there's some nice little clouds in there. You could play and play. Okay, so I'm going to leave that, and I'm just going to come with a little bit of black, and I'm going to touch up some of my little trees that went, because I've got some of that blue over top. So I'm just going to add a few of these little fields in the background. Okay, we've got a little bit of green in there, so I'm just going to use my round brush and those greens and fill them in. Okay, so just right in here, I've got a little bit of green. So I have a darker green and a nice bright lime green, which I love to add. So I'm just going to pull in a little bit of that in the background. Okay, so. And if you're enjoying this video, please subscribe or comment in the comments box below. I love hearing from you, and if you paint this piece, please tag me on Facebook. I love seeing the finished pieces. Okay, it's just Holly Hanley or at Holly Hanley Painting Designs and Classes. Okay, so I've got some greens, and then I'm just going to use some of the yellows that I've got on my palette to do some of the other little fields kind of farther back. So the darker yellow, you can tip into burnt sienna even, like this, just to kind of fill in a few little spots, like this, adding maybe some yellow, brighter yellow areas. Nice little highlights. Okay. You can get even lighter. Adding adding some different colors. Okay, so I'm just using those yellows that I have on my palette. Like this. Pulling this in beside the little barn right here. Okay, nothing too fancy. We're going to put some little shrubs in there later too. Okay, make sure you get in between that elevator as well. Okay, and I'm just using my little round brush. Whatever you want to use is fine. If you want to use the chisel of your flat, you sure can. Okay, so the chisel is just where you turn your hairs to paint them on a line. So you're using that line in the brush instead of the flat where you're using the wider edge. Okay, all right, so we've got a few more little fields we're going to put in here in the background, like so. Okay, and then I'm going to use my 12 shader here, and I'm going to create this field here, and we're going to use just kind of the chisel of my brush just to kind of chisel in that color. Got a little bit of yellow oxide. Okay, I'm going to go around the bales. Again, I like to leave a little bit of black sort of showing. So if you don't paint over the graphite lines too much, you're kind of left with that little bit of shadow in the end. Okay, and you can even blend in some burnt sienna as you get towards the bottom left of the field. Okay, and then of course as you come towards the right side, you're going to want to add a couple little highlights. So we'll blend in some lighter yellow. Okay, so some of the burnt sienna I'm just adding right at the bottom. Don't worry about those fence posts, we can put them in later. Okay. So I've got burnt sienna, got a little bit of brown on my brush, I've got some yellow oxide, just kind of doing little chisel choppy marks to fill in that field to give it a little bit of texture. Okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. Okay, and I'm just chiseling in some of that lighter yellow for a nice little highlight on the right side. Okay, and if you want to use the DecoArt Americana acrylics, you definitely can do that. I put actually a conversion in the pattern in the e-packet. So just to help you out in case you don't have the traditions, you can use the Americana. Okay, so I just got a little bit of burnt sienna. I've got some burnt umber, adding some more little chisels at the bottom here for texture. Again, I'm using mostly the chisel of my brush just to kind of get that texture in there. Okay, and I picked up some of the lighter yellow just so I had a nice little highlight right in here. You could play and play and play. Okay, and then I'm going to add another little bit of yellow and white. nice and bright, just like that horizon. Okay, just so it looks like that nice warm glow from the sky is hitting the fields. Okay, and then I'm going to switch to my round brush just so I can paint the front of the bales with that nice warm yellow. Okay, so the brighter yellow and a little bit of white. Okay, and I'm just gonna do that little front of the bale so it looks like the sun is hitting that front, even doing a little swirl, so I haven't covered up all the black. Okay. Like so. You can even add a little bit of that yellow oxide at the bottom. If you want, just to kind of give it a little accent there. And then the sides, you can just use some raw sienna. Okay, so little vertical strokes, so it looks like it's rounded. And then I'm going to add some burnt sienna and burnt umber just at the bottom. Okay, so right in here, like so. Okay, so I'm just dabbing it in with my round brush. Nothing too fancy. Okay. And just giving this a second coat just so it's a little brighter. Colors sometimes are a little bit more muted on that black base. Okay. Like so. Just using a little bit of black underneath just to kind of create a little bit of a base for them to sit on. A little bit of shadow maybe. Cast. Some cast shadow from that sunset. Okay. Okay, and then I might as well also do this field right in front while we have those yellows out. Okay, so all of the different yellows are going to come into play. Okay, this yellow oxide, again, I'm just, using my chisel of my brush to put in all of those little dashes like this, and I'm going to use all the different yellows, adding a little bit of white, just to kind of tone the color down a little bit so it's not so bright. Okay, and I'm still leaving that little bit of black in between those sections. Okay. So the yellow oxide with some white. Okay, just doing lots of little dashes. Okay. And then you can even kind of dab the color in a little bit just to so you have lots of texture. Okay. Okay, so lots of highlight right in the center there, just continuing on from that nice sunset. Okay, and then using some yellow oxide, some raw sienna to fill in, just doing lots of little dabs with the chisel of your brush. Just love it. Kind of a fun and easy way to do this field. Okay, and then of course there's gonna be a nice little shadow on the right side here underneath the barn, so it's gonna get a little darker. Like this. I'm gonna pick up some raw sienna, some burnt sienna, like that. It's a little darker over here. The barn's casting a nice shadow. Okay, so I'm just blending that all in. I haven't rinsed my brush once. I'm just pulling these colors in together. They all mesh really nicely together. Just doing lots of little strokes. Again, throw in a few little dabs here and there just to break it up. Okay, so all little sort of horizontal strokes. Just adding a few more little dashes here, filling in, and then I'm going to come back and even add some more lighter ones. Okay, you can add some little vertical strokes here for the wheat stalks. Okay. So I'm just going to put in those trees. I'm going to use my, I just use my round brush just to add a little tree trunk right here and just sort of fill in that little shrub right along the bottom there. Okay, so if you went over it and you need to sort of add it back, you want to add a little shrub right there, you can definitely do that. Okay, and just sort of touch up your trees. So you need that black underneath. Okay, and I did forget this one little patch of green over here. Okay, so I'm just gonna put that in. We've got a little bit of green behind. Little green grass behind the barn. Okay, nothing fancy, just putting that in with a little bit of that darker green. A couple touches of lighter green. Okay, and then I'm just gonna use my filbert brush with some of those really pretty reds and oranges. Okay, so we can use, doesn't matter, whatever you want to use. I'm just kind of dabbing that color in. Okay, again, this is all very loose. Okay, so I'm just, shadow is on the right side of the tree, so I know there wouldn't be too much shadow actually showing or highlight showing towards us, but I'm going to put it in anyway. So I've got a little bit of orange on my brush, and I'm just doing little dashes, little clumps. I always tell people do clumps. It just looks a little bit more natural than dabs, and I like the shadow sort of in between. Okay, it's nice to see a little bit of that black still. So you have the shadow. Okay, and then you can just grab a little bit of yellow if you want a little bit more highlight. Okay, so if you want it to be a little bit brighter on that right side, okay, just again doing those little dashes. Maybe I'll make this tree similar. You can use even burnt sienna is nice. Love those fall colors, so pretty. Burnt sienna, and then maybe a little bit of the orange. Okay, so you can see how very loose, don't think too much. Sometimes people just overthink it, just kind of dabbing in that little bit of color. Looks good. Okay, same thing on this guy. I'm going to use burnt sienna and some red. Okay, right in here. Don't be afraid to leave some of the black showing. I love it, it adds depth. Looks so good. Okay, so right in here, just adding a little bit of that orange. Okay, and you can get brighter and brighter if you want. Just adding a little bit of the yellow. Okay, and then I'm gonna make this one a little bit more yellowy. Okay, so we've got some of the nice raw sienna and golden colors. Okay, love those trees. So pretty. Okay, so again, just kind of doing little rounded dashes to fill in. I'm still leaving a lot of that black showing. Love it. Okay, just have fun. Don't overwork it. You know, leave those colors showing underneath. You can make those trees any color that you want, and I'm just gonna go with some, again, burnt sienna, raw sienna, and put in a few little shrubs in the background. Okay, even this one, just dabbing in a little bit of color here and there. Like so. Okay, so that's for the shrubs. Okay, our trees way in the background. They look like shrubs, but they're a lot bigger. Okay, just kind of in between. So I'm just going to be painting in that barn. I'm using mostly chisel marks like this, just to create the boards in the barn. Okay, don't worry too much about the window. We can always paint that back in. And I'm going to add some of that nice red color. So I'm just tipping into the burnt sienna and the red, like so. Okay, nothing too fancy, leaving that black showing again. Looks so good. It's a really nice old barn. Such beautiful colors. Just adding that texture, and I'm also going right over top of the door as well. Okay, and I'll just take some black after, and I'll just sort of accent it. Okay, so you can use red, even some raw sienna just for a few little highlights here and there. Okay, and if you need to use your round brush just to get some of those little lines in, but it's mostly burnt sienna. Okay. And the red. Okay. Just doing lots of vertical little lines. Again, I'm leaving lots of the black showing. Gives it a nice little accent. And then I'm using a little bit of the burnt sienna and some brown for the roof. Like this, just really loosely painting that in. Like so. Okay. And then taking some black, and I'll just sort of go around the door. Paint in the windows, little vertical strokes. Again, I don't do them exactly perfect because they're old and crumbling. Okay, and then of course we've got some hinges on the door. Okay, and then I'm going to add a nice little yellow oxide, just highlight on the edge here. And then the two elevators are just with some, you can use a little bit of white, touch of black, and some burnt sienna for the other one. Okay, so again, just leaving so white, just kind of filling them in, leaving the black or the graphite lines showing, so you have a little bit of separation in between those sections. Okay, so right in here, we have lots of elevators all over Saskatchewan. Okay, so again, nothing too fancy, just very scribbly, just can't see a lot of detail. And then the other one, I'm just going to use some burnt sienna. Right in here. Okay, and just painting that burnt sienna on the front here. I'm leaving the roofs. Okay. Those can have a little bit of burnt umber or black. Like this. Okay, and then I'm just gonna add the little fence in front. I think that's basically it. Okay, so just taking a little bit of black, maybe a little bit of brown, and you can very loosely paint that fence so it gets, of course, a little bit smaller as it comes towards the barn. Okay, like this. It's very crooked and old. That farmer is not keeping up his fence very well. Okay, so right in here, just very loosely using my round brush. Like so, and then just kind of add another little couple lines very loosely with, you can use a liner brush if you want. I'm just using the very tip of my round brush. Okay. Like so. It's another thing that adds to perspective is size, definitely. So they get a little larger as they come towards you and get a little smaller as they go off into the distance, more towards the barn. Okay, and you can even add another little highlight if you want, just, you know, you want to hit the tops of the fence or the top of the wire or get fancy, you sure can. Add little barbs. Okay. Thank you so much for painting along with me today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please comment if you did or press subscribe. You can check out my website, it's hollyhanley.ca, or follow me on Facebook at Holly Hanley Painting Designs and Classes. I'm Holly Hanley. Until next time, bye!